All right, class, today we're going to be doing a project to start off the class. I need you to divide up into groups that we assigned. So each go to your group table and you'll see an object at your table. Um, and I want you to look at that object and use the worksheet that I handed out. You're going to take that object and you're going to write a list of words that describe that object. It can be in a bulleted list or in full sentences, any way that you want to express anything that describes that object. And it could be how it looks, how it feels. Don't lick the object, but just describe the object. And I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and then I'm going to select a spokesperson from your group to come up and write some of the words you guys thought of on the board. All right, so go. 5 minutes. All right. Okay, so it's been 5 minutes. Now we're all going to come back. Brandon, you are the spokesperson for your group. Can you show the object that your group has?
Yes, so this was our object. It's a shiny object.
Okay, so shiny, that's one of the words you guys picked.
Yes, we picked. Do you want me to list all of the?
Give me some of the words you listed to describe it.
Okay. So we thought some of the words we came up with are hard, shiny, maybe metallic, metal, kind of cold. We described that it was cold because it's just cold to the touch, and then it's got this black paint around the edge. So yeah, so it's got like little paint in the letters too. It's really shiny and clear. You can almost see yourself in it. So yeah, those are some of the things we came up with.
Those are great, and we'll have the other class members put their object or their words up on the board too. Okay, now everyone get back into your groups, and this time you'll see on your worksheet that you have a spot where I want you to make some guesses or record your ideas about what this object might have been for, or guesses you have about who owned this object. So take 5 minutes and talk about that as a class. What kind of person would own this object, or what did they use it for? Write those down on your organizer and be prepared to have someone come up and share with the class. There's also a spot on there to draw a picture of the person that owns this object. So have some fun, and I'm going to collect these later, and my favorite pictures are going to go up on the board and for you guys to look at. So take 5 minutes and go. 5 minutes go by. Okay, everybody come back together. And I need somebody to come up again and describe what their group did. So, Brandon.
Yes.
Can you come up and tell us what your group talked about who might have owned this object?
Yes. So, we talked it over, and it says right here on it. It says, I don't know if you can see that, but it says Ford Motor Company on it. So, Ford, we know is a brand of car. So we said this object obviously belonged to a car, and we don't know exactly how it fits on, but maybe we said it could be like on the trunk of the car. I don't know. Maybe it could be like an ornament or something that was on it, some element that was on the outside of the car, and some of the I don't know. It looks kind of older. It's not really. It's made out of this shiny metal, like this chrome, and I guess that's not really used on cars much anymore. So it's kind of old, maybe. And then we said, like, for the person who owns this object, maybe they're a little bit older. And we said that, well, because it's in such nice condition, we said maybe they were a collector of things like this, and maybe they. Maybe this was one of their hobbies. Maybe they were interested in it. So yeah, those were some of the things that we came up with for what this object might have been.
All right, that's great. So you guys have made lists of words on the board and of phrases used to describe things, and we have one list that are words that describe the appearance and the characteristics of the object, and then another that are your guesses and ideas about what this object was for or who it belonged to. And right now we're going to have a discussion about what kinds of words those are. So the ones that you used to describe the object are what we call observations. So from the types of words that are up on the board, could somebody give me a definition for the word observation? How would you describe an observation?
So maybe observations are just really like simple things like what something is, or what it looks like, or what it feels like, things like that.
Right. So an observation is something that we use our senses to see or notice about an object or a situation. So they're traits of an object or its qualities that we noticed. And those are what you observe. That's where the word comes from, observation. And then the other words that we used and the phrases where we made guesses and ideas about what the object might have been for or who it belonged to or what that person might have used it, those are called inferences. So does anyone know what it means to infer something?
I've heard that word used before, but I'm guessing it means like a guess about, or maybe like a guess without actually seeing something.
Uh, Very close. So to infer means that from the things you observe or things you already know, you make a guess or an idea about something. And so you guys looked at these objects and you saw the characteristics they had, you made observations about them, and then you inferred things about what the object was for and who owned it. And so you used observations to make an inference. That's how that usually works. You start with the observations and then make inferences. If you make inferences without observing something, do you think you're going to make good inferences?
No, I don't think so, because I think uh, you have to study the object out that you have, or study something out before you can decide something else about it.
Great. So now we have some worksheets that we're going to have you read through with your group, and they talk about a famous experiment. Um, and I want you to read through it as a group, and with the highlighters on your tables, I want you to highlight with one color observations that the researchers made. And so remember what observations are. And I want you to actually write down definitions of observation and inference. Write it in your own words on your sheet. And then so highlight observations in one color and then inferences in another color. And if you need a reminder about what those are, ask the members in your group first. And if nobody in your group is sure, you can raise your hand and I'll come over and talk to you. And I'll be walking around and seeing how you're doing as you read through the experiment. So go ahead and read through those and I'll give you about 5 minutes to work on that project.
Okay.
Okay, so everyone had the same experiment, and it talked about Charles Darwin's trip to the Galapagos Islands and the birds that he collected there. Does anyone want to explain some of the things that they read about in the experiment?
Yeah, I could explain something about that.
Sure, Brandon.
So we talked about how Darwin looked at the finches on the island, so the birds, and he looked at them and saw how they were different, and he was able to. So we were able to go through and highlight things that he just saw and recorded about the birds, and also some inferences, so things that he made, or that he deduced because he looked at the birds.
Great. Yeah, so you were able to find some observations that he made and some inferences he made. And so from you could see that from the data that Darwin collected about the birds, he was able to predict things and to infer things about those birds and even connect it back to evolution and those principles of evolution we've been learning about in class. So another important person in evolution history is a man named Ronald Wiseman. And we're going to talk about an experiment he did, and I'm going to show you a presentation now. And I'm just going to explain the experiment he did, and then we're going to have you take a short quiz where you talk about some of the observations and inferences that Dr. Wiseman made. So let me just go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint, and then we'll talk about it together. Okay, so Ronald Wiseman, he read Darwin's theories about natural selection, and he found that idea really strange, and he wanted to find another way to test how animals inherit traits. And so he did studies with mice, and he used thousands of mice in his research projects, and he wanted to see if he cut the tails off of mice, if they would have babies that had tails that were cut off. He wanted to see if changing the mouse's body during its life would change its babies. Today we know that that's not how inheritance works, that even if you lose an arm or a leg in this life, it doesn't pass on to your children because your DNA, the information that is in your body about how your body should be arranged, stays the same, even if the outside is altered. But they didn't know that back then, and Weismann wanted to test if this would change anything. And so, for many generations of mice that he bred, he would cut off the adults' tails and then let them breed, and then he would make measurements and observations of all of the baby mice about what their tails looked like. And then when they became adults, he would do the same thing again. And for generations and generations of mice, he cut off their tails and then wrote down what he saw in their babies. And he found that even though he cut off the tails for so many generations, that the mouse's tails did not change. And from that, he decided that animals could not inherit acquired traits, which means that they could not pass on things that happened to their body during their lifetime. Today we know genetics is a little more complicated than that, but for this class, as far as we're going to talk about, this is a simple enough picture of it for you guys. Alright, so now I want you to take your worksheets, their quiz sheet. I'm going to pass them out to you, and as you're going through the sheet, I want you to think about the observations and the inferences Wiseman made, and review the PowerPoint slide that I have up on the board to remind you of anything. And then there's an essay question at the bottom where I want you to take some time to think about why this is important to scientific research, and write down your ideas about that, and then I'm going to collect those worksheets from you. So go ahead and work on that. Okay, so everyone's had enough time to work on those. I want to have a discussion at the end of the class now. Why was Wiseman's experiment important? Does anybody have any ideas about that?
I think it was really important because we didn't know before that, or science didn't know before his experiment, how traits were passed on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also, so he kind of proved that the traits, or I guess not proved, but showed that traits aren't acquired, and so there must be some other way, and it opened the way for us to study it more.
Exactly. And so that shows how designing good experiments is a key to scientific research, and how learning to think like a scientist and connecting your observations and your inferences is how we're able to progress and learn more in science. And so I want you to remember the difference between an observation and an inference, because it's going to be important later on in class when you guys are going to start designing your own experiments. All right. Thank you for that.